Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Andrea and I'm really excited about today's video. So today we're going to talk about why you should lower your expectations of others. We're told that it's great to have high expectations, but most of the time we find ourselves really disappointed because people are just not able to meet them. We have hope that maybe one day there's going to be someone who's going to be able to meet those standards, and we hold on to that hope so tightly. We live in this culture that tells us to not settle, right? If someone isn't able to meet your expectations, well, cut them off. You're only supposed to surround yourself with the best of the best, and you're always supposed to be trying to reach the best version of yourselves. Because of this culture of not settling, I feel like a lot of us are setting these unrealistic standards for the people around us and for ourselves. It's not a bad thing to have expectations, but I do think it's important that we differentiate between a realistic and unrealistic expectation. When I think of realistic expectations, I think of something that seems fair. I think it's realistic to expect respect from other people. It's realistic to expect no physical violence from a person. I think it's also realistic to expect, depending on the person, for them to be nice to you. Now, an unrealistic expectation, for instance, is wanting somebody, for example, to give you the world. Nobody can give you the world, and I feel like in the society that we live in, we've been told this is a realistic expectation. Somebody should be able to provide you all the happiness that you need and meet all the expectations you have. But this is why we end up so disappointed with people. Sometimes we meet some really amazing people, but because they're not able to meet one specific expectation that we have for them, we're like, you know what? This isn't worth my time. On to the next. Something also really unrealistic to expect is wanting somebody to assume what you want at all times. And I'm guilty of this. I know a lot of us are. We just want people to read our minds. We don't want to have to tell them what they need to do for us. And I think this is usually a problem in romantic relationships where you're expecting your partner to kind of know what you want. You want them to know, hey, you're supposed to bring me flowers every week. Or you want them to know that they should be sending you a good morning text every single day. But we always hold these expectations without sometimes communicating them. Sometimes there's people who you tell them, hey, I want this, and they still don't do it. But for the most part, a lot of us are expecting things that we don't ask for. And then we just end up hurting our own feelings because we're thinking to ourselves like, wow, they can't even do this simple gesture. But what if you tried communicating to them, hey, can you do this for me? I think a lot of us are told that, if they don't do it on their own, it's not genuine. But that's just so unrealistic. People are not mind readers. Another unrealistic expectation is to expect somebody to never make a mistake or just have a slip up. I don't know. I feel kind of confused on this one because nowadays we're told that it's okay to make mistakes, but yet we are so harsh on people and their mistakes. Even myself. You can have somebody do so many good things for you, but then they make one mistake and you just kind of forget all the good things that they do. And I think society just kind of encourages us to punish people for their mistakes, even if they're small or whatever size they are. We're just encouraged to kind of cancel people out. I also think it's unrealistic to expect somebody to do something you haven't done for other people. I feel like there's a lot of examples of this, but the only one I can think of right now is a long distance relationship. So let's say your partner lives 5 hours away, but you're expecting him to come visit you at least once a week. Even though it's 5 hours away and they're working full time, going to school full time, you're still expecting them to come once a week, right? And let's say 1 week they're not able to come, and then you get all furious and everything. But have you ever driven to go see them? No, you haven't. Because you feel entitled for them to come see you. So this is an example of holding an expectation that you haven't even done. A lot of us, we claim that, if I was in their position, I would do this. But until you've actually experienced it, I don't think it's fair to hold people to those expectations. Now, if you've done it for them before and you're expecting it back, I think that's a little more fair. There are so many things that encourage us to have these unrealistic expectations. And I think the biggest one is social media. We see the best version of people on the internet. And because we do, it makes us want to hold them to this really high standard. It's like that belief that when you see people who look good and just seem confident, it makes you have these unrealistic expectations. You just feel like because they have all their things together and they look good, they're able to meet these really high expectations you might have for them. Let's say maybe you have a crush on somebody and you might not even know them, but you see their Instagram and it's like super cool and you're like, whoa, this is my person. This person would be able to do all these things because, I mean, look at their Instagram feed is amazing. So that must mean they're an amazing human. It just really messes with our heads in terms of the expectations we have for these people. People post everything on social media. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes people post some really cool stuff. People be doing really cool stuff for their friends, for their partners. And, it's nice to see these things, but sometimes it makes us want to hold these unrealistic standards and expectations for people in our lives. For instance, if you see someone's partner buying them really expensive gifts and they're uploading them on the internet, then you're thinking about your partner and you're like, wow, why don't they do that for me? But while it would be nice to get all those expensive gifts, it's just an unrealistic expectation to have for your partner. Just because they're not getting you expensive gifts doesn't mean they're a bad partner. In a way, social media kind of tells people what's acceptable and what is not. So if your boyfriend isn't flooding you with gifts, then he must not be a good boyfriend. Or if your friend isn't constantly posting you and, going out with you, your friend must not be a good person. I don't know, just by the type of content that people post on Instagram and just other platforms, it kind of tells you what expectations you should have for the people in your life. And the truth is, everyone's life is really different, but for some reason, we let social media influence us really heavy. And a lot of us also have these unrealistic or high expectations because of the people surrounding us and their influence. For instance, if your family members have really high expectations of you, that's probably going to lead you to have high expectations of other people. If your friends also have high expectations, you're probably going to have high expectations. And it's just normal to kind of follow their pattern. Sometimes we also hold unrealistic expectations of people because we just assume that they think like us, that they have the same morals and values as we do. And this is a mistake that a lot of us make way too often. You can't be holding expectations for other people other than yourself, honestly, because everyone has a different background and just a different upbringing and life experiences. Even if you have a similar identity, a same ethnicity, anything, there's still a lot of life experiences that are going to differentiate you from that person. And even the slightest experience can change like the way you view the world and just the expectations you hold for people. And I think a lot of us just make that mistake of assuming that, because we have this expectation, that person also has those same expectations or they're going to be able to meet them. But the truth is, a lot of people see things very differently, and it's just out of our control. You guys know what's hard? It's hard to know whether or not your expectations are way too high. There's this really fine line between a realistic expectation and an unrealistic one. But I don't really have the answer to this because everybody sees expectations differently. But I think there are some signs that might tell you that your expectations might be a little too high. And I've seen this in my life, but if you feel very disrespected constantly, I feel like that might be an indicator that your expectations are a little too high. Just constantly feeling disrespected and just disappointed. For a long time, I held really high expectations for the people that I allowed into my life and just all those around me. And I constantly found myself feeling really frustrated because I was holding these unrealistic expectations for them. For instance, my closest friend, I would hope she would text me every single day. But was I texting her every single day? I wasn't. Or if I was seeing somebody, I would expect them to always text me first, always text me good night every single night. And if they weren't, I'd be so quick to cut them off. I was just like, I just felt disappointed, but I never looked inwards. Was I doing that? I wasn't, right? But I felt, for some reason, just really disrespected. I just couldn't believe that these people didn't know what I was expecting from them. Like, I thought it was obvious. And for that reason, I always just found myself feeling really mad with the world. It was not a good feeling. But, I would keep telling myself that, no, like, this is right. I'm supposed to have these high expectations. And the idea with having higher expectations is that you're going to be happier, right? Because you're not going to be dealing with BS or any of that stuff. But the opposite actually happened. I ended up much more stressed and just disappointed. I also think if you don't really have a lot of compassion for people who do something wrong or just make a mistake, that might also be an indicator that your expectations are a little too high. I think it's really important to have compassion for other people. People make mistakes. Somebody might meet your expectations 90% of the time, but they're going to make mistakes, right? And if you can't forgive somebody or you can't put yourself in their shoes and you just tell yourself like, whoa, I would never do that, and you just look down on them, I think just being really judgmental is an indicator that you have really high expectations, because if your expectations weren't that high, I don't think you'd be judging somebody so harshly. I think another indicator that you might have really high expectations is just being a perfectionist and expecting it from other people. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a perfectionist. I would argue I'm one myself, but you can't hold that same expectation for other people. Just because you're deciding to live your life that way doesn't mean everyone else has to. Having really high expectations might actually be a sign of a bigger problem. And I think a lot of people who have high expectations tend to have a low self-esteem. Speaking from my experience, during the time period in which I held really high expectations for other people, I noticed I was also heavily depending on other people to be happy. Like, yes, it's normal to get disappointed when people don't meet the expectations you have for them, but your whole life shouldn't revolve around that. I remember just spending my days thinking about how much people sucked and just how upset I was. And, even though, yes, it's disappointing for people not to meet your expectations, it shouldn't really be that big of a deal. I feel like this just kind of indicates that all your happiness is coming from external sources and not from yourself. What's not talked about enough is just that the person who holds really high expectations ends up hurt the most, in my opinion at least. Like, yes, you might get something good out of having high expectations, but I think 90% of the time you're probably going to be very disappointed, and it's just a very frustrating situation to be in and just really stressful. Because just imagine, if you had lower expectations, you probably wouldn't be as stressed out, and you'd also be more understanding of people, and you'd probably be happier because since you don't have these really strict expectations for other people, you're not going to be judging them or being so critical of them. I think having lower expectations is just so much less stressful, and it helps you just to be more understanding of other people. It helps you be more patient, and I just think it makes you be a better person. Something that I feel like isn't really clear is whether or not somebody failed your expectations or they actually failed you. Because I think it's one thing to fail to meet someone's expectations, but it's a whole other thing when somebody just really disappoints you. It wasn't because of the expectation, but they just genuinely did something that really wasn't good. And I think we need to do a better job at being able to notice which one it is. It's hard to think of an example for this, but if somebody cheated on you, for instance, the act of cheating isn't just failing to meet your expectations. They just failed you, right? They were not able to be a good partner. They did the most terrible thing ever. But that's not necessarily failing to meet your expectations. That's just even a bigger issue, right? And I feel like sometimes we need to do a better job at being able to notice whether or not somebody is just human and they weren't able to meet these high expectations that we have for them, or they actually just failed us and they were a poor friend or a poor partner. So how then should we manage our expectations for people? The minute somebody fails to meet our expectations, we're so quick to label them as bad. And I think what's missing for a lot of us is seeing people as humans. And seeing people as humans just means knowing that humans are inherently flawed. I don't care who you are imperfect. And that means you're going to make mistakes, and you just can't hold these perfect expectations for people. When it comes to managing expectations for people, it really depends on who you're talking about. I feel like if it's somebody that you don't know, you're probably better off having no expectations. And, this might sound a little scary, but I mean, really think about it. When you don't have any expectations, you're not going to be disappointed. One of the big reasons we even have expectations of people in the first place is because we usually know them. We usually know a little bit about their character and what they've done for other people in the past. But if you're thinking about expectations for a person who you don't even know, and you have no idea what their morals are or anything like that, it's so unrealistic to hold them to any expectation. And if you're going based off just outwardly how they look or what you assume they are, you're going to be disappointed. Now, for somebody that you do know, I think it's fair to have some expectations that you've communicated to them and the ones that they've agreed to. But if you're holding expectations that you've never really asked for, I honestly think you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. It's not a bad thing to tell people what you want. Also, just really think about whether or not having high expectations is making you any happier. Because more often than not, people who have really high expectations are always the most stressed and are constantly frustrated, right? They're frustrated with the world. And I feel like having high expectations just equals disappointment, right? And when you're disappointed in a lot of people, you tend to kind of make yourself feel really good about yourself. You think you're different than other people. You just feel better, right? And it makes you have this really negative outlook on the world and just everyone around you. And in a lot of ways, when we have these high expectations, it's because we're projecting our own problems. Maybe in the past somebody disappointed you, so now you have some really high standards for potential partners. But we forget that it's not a person's job to fulfill those expectations. I think sometimes we feel like our expectations are deal breakers, and if people are not able to meet them, we're just not going to be happy. But really ask yourself, for instance, if one of your expectations is for your partner to give you a gift every single week, and do you really think that gift that you're going to get every week is the reason you guys are together? Like, you're going to be so unhappy if they don't bring you a gift? More than likely, you're going to be just fine. So I think it can be important to maybe reevaluate the expectations you have and whether or not they're actually making you any happier. If there's something that you feel like you need in order to feel good and just be happy, I think it's important to tell your friends about it or tell your partner about it, your family about it. Have a conversation with them, tell them what you see as important, and ask them what their value system is, and just reach some type of compromise. More often than not, these high expectations that we have are actually pretty flexible if you have a conversation with somebody. In a lot of ways, having high expectations can also make us lack gratitude. It can make you overlook the great things somebody already is doing for you, and it makes you take it for granted. Lastly, sometimes the people around you might question the expectations that you have, but at the end of the day, what really matters is what makes you happy. That's all I have for you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please comment down below your thoughts, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.